Alright guys, welcome back to more Legacy action on the channel. A few days ago I was lucky to top 8 a Legacy challenge with this sweet Jeskai StifleNought deck. And yeah, why not go through the deck and go through some replays for you guys viewing pleasure. So at its core, this is a base Wasteland deck that can play the tempo role, but we also have some cool upside for the opponent to worry about. That is mainly Phyrexian Dreadnought in combination with either Consigned to Memory, Stifle, or Dress Down. It produces a 12/12. You can kind of circumvent the ETB drawback of Dreadnought. Then to supplement that, we have a couple of Fury, Emergent Intelligence, basically a poor man's Psychic Frog, 1/3, draws a card if it connects. But it has an amazing upside with Dreadnought, drawing 12 cards and effectively winning the game. And it's blue Force Will. So this is also true for Oculus. It is a good standalone threat that has upside with Dreadnought. If you manifest a Dreadnought, flavor win there, I guess. You can kind of cheat a Dreadnought into play. But if you don't, you have a great standalone threat and pitches to Force Will when it's not great. To round out the creatures, we have Tamiyo. That's very much just a standalone engine card. Just imagine if this card gets plowed, it's more likely your other creatures survive. If it doesn't get plowed, you get some advantage. You can do some cool things. Buy back Force of Will in the right matchup. Buy back Source to Plowshares in the right matchup, etc. So pretty cool there. Then we have the solid removal spells. This is a big reason to want white at the moment. Prismatic Ending as your clean Chalice of the Void removal. And of course, Source of Plowshares. No need to introduce that. I did change the mana base a little bit recently with 2 copies of Volcanic Island. Volcanic Island is a card that lets me ending for 3 against stuff like, I don't know, Bombardier, Nadu, Fleshraker, you name it. And it lets me cast Pyroblast out of the sideboard. So for now, I think it's worth it. My deck still has the ability to play from basics, kind of like the blue-black tempo decks. These 2 Volcanic Islands basically replace 2 basic islands, so we did make our mana base worse. If, let's say, your opponent goes turn 1 Blood Moon, we now only have the 1 island in the deck and not 3 islands to draw to. So let's keep an eye out for that one. We play the cantrips. Let's talk a little bit about the different strengths of these Stifle effects. So Consign obviously can counter opposing triggers, great against colorless decks. Stifle can do a little bit of everything, mainly counter wastelands and fetches. And then Dress Down. Maybe you kill some Saga tokens, maybe you shut off some Hate Bears for the time being, and it provides the ability to go multiple Dreadnoughts. So they're good in different situations, so I like to split for now. Sideboard-wise, I have a couple of Triumph of St. Catherine. This card is mainly good against Lightning Bolt decks. It's good against Fatal Push decks. Prismatic Ending is a good card against Chalice, as I talked about. Good against 1-drops, good against Chalice. Then I play 3 copies of Force Negation, and this is basically because I just hate when I don't get to play the game without foreshadowing too much. Yeah, this card is just a card that's good against any combo deck, so I enjoy that rather than try and get the guessing game right with stuff like, I don't know, Deafening Silence, Stony Silence, Lavinia, Meddling Mage, stuff like that. A couple of Hydroblasts. They're very good against Mono Red Prison for obvious reasons. It's good against Delver. It's good against the card Meltdown. Love that card. And a couple of Pyroblasts, you know, there are enough Force of Wills, Murktide Regions, you name it out there for that card to be good in a small number. A couple of Cages, Hard Graveyard Hate that also doubles against Nadu. 4th Consign for the colorless matchups. And then the last card is Minor Misstep. Minor Misstep is a cool one because we're in the market of protecting our creatures against Plow, Push, you name it, in the first place. And the format just has a lot of, you know, Dark Rituals here, Entombs there, Crop Rotations there. So I'm pretty confident the Minor Misstep is a great fit for this deck. But yeah, it's kind of a work in progress. Can change week to week. But for now, I'm happy with this 75. And let's see how it went in the Legacy Challenge. All right, this is round 1, game 2. I'm playing against Teamer Delver. I brought in a lot of Minor Missteps, as you can see in my opening hand. And yeah, brought out my counterspells, brought in some cheap answer cards alongside Triumph of St. Catherine. So pretty easy keep here. What I like about this deck is that you can stay on your basic lands and wasteland matchups, and you can kind of have, you know, remove that stress alongside maybe even blanking wastelands on your opponent's side of the table. I will say this version plays fewer islands than other versions because I want to fit in the Pyroblast and the volcanic islands to make Prismatic Ending better. My opponent leads on a Ponder. I can pass here, holding up Stifle. Opponent goes Delver. This is just good sequencing from the opponent, so I think what I end up doing here is hang on to the misstep, because I can untap and Prismatic Ending the Delver. Also, if my opponent has a second 1-drop, maybe I can catch them with Stifle here, but well played by the opponent, and definitely making my minor missteps look kind of awkward. Also, my opponent, right now, since I did not fetch, they can kind of put together that either I have Stifle, or I'm not interested in going for the Surveil land, which is kind of the story I'm trying to tell here. Here comes Prismatic Ending. Kill the Delver. If I did not have a Prismatic Ending, I would have fetched for Basic Island and minor misstep the Delver, because Plow is hopefully going to take care of a Murktide later. So here, just shows again why Stifle is awkward. I go for exactly that play of misstepping a 1-drop because Plow kind of needs to kill Murktide later on if everything goes to plan. My opponent dazes, so it resolves. Kind of sad about that. As long as it's a 1-1, I think I'm in decent shape, though. My opponent's hand at this point could be anything from Bolt to some Blasts. I draw land here, which is not bad. And I find Prismatic Ending on top of my deck, so that's kind of ideal. Here, I get Wastelanded on the Archive. I decide to Stifle. Pretty happy about that. My opponent gets Delirium here. And since I have Ending on top, I'm going to take the damage. Chandler getting in there. My opponent is trying to start the aggression. Ending, that's kind of ideal that I got to trade 2 endings for 2 1-drops. Still have the Plow available. Oh yeah, wow. Yeah, I remember this one. So I basically click through my opponent's fetch sack here. I think if I know what I'm doing, I Stifle here. But I guess that's just lack of practice with the deck in general. Feed the Beast hits, I believe, land Ponder, which is not the end of the world. But it's still very bad when I could have delayed that. And here I Stifle my opponent. So this fetch represents, in my opinion, that my opponent wanted to play Questing Druid and cast the Ponder. So I still get to catch a fetch land. It's just a bit later. And now I meant minor misstep my opponent's Ponder to basically stunt their development. I don't think that's necessarily a good play or a bad play. Could be convinced that it was bad. I do draw the Curie here, which I would have loved to be able to protect. The opponent takes the turn. They want to play around days, so this doesn't necessarily prove much. Here's Questing Druid. No, they don't respect days, I guess. Okay. So they kill it with Pyroblast. This tells me that, I mean, they don't have Lightning Bolt in hand. It makes a lot of sense if you trim Lightning Bolt in the matchup. Curie dies here. I don't have days. If I had days in my deck, I would have brainstormed a response. Here I draw Dreadnought, and I find some pretty good cards here. So let's see how I decide to proceed. Pyroblast and Dreadnought, and then shuffle those because they're both uncastable right now, I guess. Here I Plow, and now I'm pretty behind, right? My opponent has 3 cards. Wow, here's another Druid. So this game looks unwinnable at this point, but I guess my opponent hit a daze there. Also Brainstorm now to fix their hand. Yeah, this is not looking great. But here, I Miracle Triumph of St. Catherine, which resolves. And that card is very hard to deal with in the matchup. Brazen Borrower comes to mind. Here's Murktide. I thankfully am drawing a lot of removal spells. I killed a Murktide on attack, so in theory my opponent can trade with Questing Druid plus a Bolt. So I think in this case, if my opponent blocks, I kill it with Plow, which is not ideal sequencing, but I think it's worth it. My opponent did not have a Plow. I keep growing the Questing Druid. Here's the Delver Secrets. So right now my opponent has 5 power on the battlefield and a Channeler. Okay. So I believe what I do here is my opponent stays back with Questing Druid. That's kind of interesting. I believe what I do here is I plow end of turn to lock up my to unlock my mana. Basically, it's mainly because I can draw like Oculus. I can draw a Stifle effect and play around days. It's just good to use your mana here, especially because my opponent's going to block anyway. This ensures another favorable attack. I draw Volcanic Island. If I play well, I slow roll it. There's no reason to expose it here. If I draw Pyroblast later, I'm going to be very happy that I slow rolled it. Oh, here's a Lightning Bolt. My opponent is targeting me with Lightning Bolt. This must be a mistake. Also, it's kind of interesting my opponent does not have Delirium. They do now. Oh wow, yeah, that was not a good bolt. The opponent could have traded Chandler and Bolt for the Triumph, and now it's a must attack, which is not ideal either. Opponent has to pass. I draw Consign. So before we move on with this turn, let's try and think what's in our opponent's hand at this point. Opponent did not play to the board, so opponent could have Pyroblast. Opponent could have Daze. Opponent could have Force. Opponent could have, I guess, another Bolt. So the cool thing about Consign is I play Dreadnought, and then my opponent kind of has to commit to letting that happen, right? Resolve, and then once it's in play, this will get around the counters. So I attack first here. Opponent has to take the damage. That's the third hit from Triumph. Pretty cool. Then I hope I play a land, and then I play Dreadnought. And so now, what is my opponent going to do here if they have a Force of Will? Should they force the Dreadnought? I mean, pretty tough call, right? I do have 2 Stifles in my yard, so maybe that should have been the tiebreaker in case my opponent has to Force a Will, because I want to play 1 more Stifle, but I probably play more Consigns, right? But anyway, this resolves, and I decide to replicate it twice. This way, I'm playing around double Pyroblast. Let's say I only replicate it once, then I can get double Pyroblasted for, you know, little reason. So, of course, I turn on Daze here, but there's no downside to this. Here's Daze on the first one. Simply just to get a trigger. My opponent flips the Delver with a Ponder, so that's not the card they need, but it's the card, you know, that digs for what they need. I believe this is a shuffle, and then it's a concession. So we got a good start to the tournament here. My opponent failed to deal with Triumph and Dreadnought. Things lined up very well. Bought infinite time with the removal spells. I even survived getting Questing Druid twice, and my opponent played a big Murktide. So yeah, drawing a lot of removal spells is definitely the way to beat that matchup. And of course, a timely Triumph of St. Catherine. So yeah, let's keep it up.
All right, guys, quick message here. If you want to have access to my deck guides, my strategy articles, whether you want to pitch me a sweet deck to play on the channel, whether you want to look into coaching, or simply just want to say thank you for the content I put out, please check out my Patreon below and become a Baron today. Now, let's get back to the games.
All right, round 2 of the Legacy Challenge. I'm playing Jeskai's StifleNought. I'm up against Mono Red Prison here. I'm currently up a game, so I'm on the draw for game 2. And this is not a keepable hand, 0 lands. I sideboarded out my Tamios, my Dazes, and I even trim a couple of Ponders in a matchup like this. Basically, Chalice of the Void matchup on the draw. I think that's something you can do in numerous matchups, where either they have Chalice, or you simply don't have time to mess around, basically. You can't allow your opponent to have 2 full turns before you impact the board. I put a Triumph on the bottom here, pretty standard. My opponent with a mulligan to 5, passing the turn, so that's good news for me. I hold up Stifle and Consign here. I think that's reasonable. My opponent plays Fable. Fable resolves, and then I can Stifle, you know, the 2/2. That's just decent, nothing great, but it's probably going to be fine against a hand like my opponent's here. The reason why I use the Stifle is I would rather have the flexibility to counter a One Ring later with Consign, where Stifle is not able to do that, so they can kind of do different things in the matchup. So here I draw Ponder. I see a good Ponder here. I decide to wasteland my opponent's red source. This is a play that is kind of an investment into the future, so worst thing can happen in the short term, but the opponent will have to kill off their mana base, and in this case, I can actually deal with most things thanks to this Hydroblast. Opponent kills their land and exiles the Spirit Guide to develop a Paragoyf, and at this point, that's just exactly what the doctor ordered. The opponent's already on a Mold of 5. I did find my second land on the Ponder as well. I play a little bit around, you know, my opponent's last card being Pyroblast here. I like that a lot. My opponent now has a Reflection that doesn't do a whole lot on its own. Let's see if I fetch here or I like the last card. I think I even like the last card on the Ponder. Yep, that was the Source to Plowshares. So now I develop my 1/3 with the intention of plowing and attacking through the Reflection. I think my opponent, yeah, so what does this tell us? Opponent attacks here. To me, that basically says they have Dead Gone in hand. But I don't think this is a bait that I will realistically take here. I think it's way better to stay back and then, well, I guess staying back does not help the Dead Gone. I don't know. Maybe the opponent made a good play here, making the best of a bad situation. But anyway, I get to connect with my Ophidian here. Drawing a card, that's a Dreadnought. So now, what do? I believe I just passed a turn. Because now if something happens, I interact. If something does not happen, I can end step the dress down. Now the opponent stays back. Interesting. End step, dress down. Draw a Stifle, draw another Dreadnought. That's kind of interesting. I guess I just jammed 2 Dreadnoughts here. Yeah, I jammed 2 Dreadnoughts. Passed a turn. At this point, my opponent can't really do much, and there's the concession. So we made a few decisions this game that was cool. We held up mana in the beginning. We wastelanded the red source over the City of Traders to kind of invest into the future. We got lucky that the card they played was something I could just kill with a Hydroblast and not care. And then they kind of was left with this 2/2 that didn't do much, and probably a bunch of 3-drops in hand. So, and we had infinite interaction here. So I like how I played this game. Sometimes you are most likely going to win no matter how you play in a game like this. But I think just developing the good habits and exposing yourself to the least amount of risk, that could be something you want to strive for. And hopefully in some match, that'll be the difference maker. I don't think it was the difference maker here at all, but I think having that kind of foresight will help you a lot in the future. So yeah, nice start here. 2-0 start with the Jeskai Dreadnought. Let's see if we can keep it up. All right, this is round 4. I decided to skip round 3. It was very uneventful. I lost to Oops All Spells. Got killed turn 1, game 1, shut down my opponent game 2, and then got killed turn 1 with backup on game 3. So those games are a big part of Legacy, so you have to prepare with your 75. But for gameplay and analysis reasons, I decided to not include that match. It would have been the same if I won the match. It hasn't anything to do with the outcome of the match, simply just whether it's interesting or not. So I hope you guys accept that. Here I'm on the draw against Delver. I'm up a game. Currently 2-1 in the tournament. I did the same sideboarding, got rid of the counters, trimmed the Dreadnought, put in all the interaction, and hopefully we get to play a game that is reminiscent of the previous Delver matchup. Volcanic Pass. That is either an invitation to get wastelanded or, you know, an actual brainstorm hand. Right now we can't really capitalize on either, so it's mainly just an observation. Our hand is very cantrip heavy. I'll sit on basics here and try and churn. If my opponent has multiple Pyroblasts, I could see them Pyroblasting a Ponder. Oh, nice. I saw 2 lands and an Oculus. The Oculus is a card that I prefer to just have in my deck for later in the matchup. It's not something that's going to be awesome out of my opening hand very often. Also worth noting is the Scalding Tarn does not get the Plains. Let's see if the second fetch land there is able to get a Plains. Actually didn't get a good enough look. No Brainstorm in a turn. So this could be the good old like 3-lander, 4-lander trying to bait the turn 1. Also note that my opponent is not fetching here, so this has heavy heavy land written all over it, where my opponent actively wants me to wasteland, wants me to stifle. Okay, I guess that's not the case here. Here's the end step, Seek the Beast. That's a cool play. Getting a bauble in a daze, so I decide to play a land and a brainstorm here. Another blue fetch, but I do find my planes here. That's kind of cool. I get rid of Oculus and Dreadnought. This is a lot of how you approach the matchup. I don't want to say anything like super hard rule, but I will say it's not unusual that you're like the control deck. So those creatures are more like something you want to naturally incorporate in a longer game rather than something you want to jam early and often. I believe I go Surveil here. And develops a Druid. I really like that Druid out of the teamer deck, adding to your little bit of card advantage, a little bit of a creature. I like that a lot. I mill over Stifle here. Opponent cantrips from Bauble. And now what I can do is Tamiyo Brainstorm. But I decide to wait here and try and make my opponent make a move, basically. Here's Brainstorm. Obviously, flipping the Tamiyo now wouldn't do anything, so I decided to stay put here. I do have 2 plows. So yeah, let's just finish that thought. I do have 2 plows, so I don't mind killing a questing druid here. Let's see. Dragon Rage Channeler is a card that offers a lot of selection, building graveyard, etc. So I wouldn't be surprised if I was supposed to deal with this on the stack, but I don't. Interesting. I'll let my opponent do all their things. Maybe I block Brainstorm here. Let's see. Take the damage. Plow at end of turn. What's the point about that? Let's see. I guess I'm still trying to help my opponent make some move here with the Hydro. I draw Minor Misstep. That's a good one. Here's Hydroblast, which gets forced. And that, yeah, this is where the game gets a bit weird. So forcing a Hydroblast, certainly did not expect that. I find a Prismatic Ending here. That's awesome. I don't get forced a second time. Get in, get my clue, so I do have the upper hand here. Here's Murktide. Murktide I have covered with the plow, so I'm not too scared of that. I do a fetch here, plow. I wonder if I brainstorm in response. I don't, so the argument to brainstorm in response here is to find a Pyroblast, but I think I'm going to slow things down here by blocking and brainstorming. Delver, pretty easy 1-for-1 trade here. Opponent with 2 cards left, so my opponent's definitely ahead here because of the big creature. I'm going to do the block cast Brainstorm here to buy some time. Let's see if my opponent has anything here. Pyroblasting the Brainstorm. This is a good play because if it works, my Tamiyo dies in combat, but I have the second one, which is quite clutch. Ooh, I can now make a Dreadnought next turn, so I can sign a Dreadnought. So I prevent some damage here, I flip my Walker, and also as a Planeswalker, my opponent can let it live, but then I get a plow back. If they attack it, it's kind of like more life gain, so that's my mindset here. My opponent with 1 card left. And in theory, that could be something like a Braid or Meltdown or whatever. But, I mean, I don't have agency here. I just get to play my Phyrexian Dreadnought and hope it's enough. I have a Clue and a Tamiyo in play. 1 card in hand. So I wonder how I play here. Should probably play around... Oh, I know my next card is a land. Okay, I like this play. So now I play Dreadnought. Let's see how I play here. Oh, wow. I decided to play into Pyroblast here. I don't like this. I don't think I was supposed to play like this. I was supposed to fetch here. I think right now I'm focused on the fact that 6 + 6 is 12. But the Tameo is shrinking the Murktide, and I forgot about that. So yeah, if I get Pyroblasted there, it's not forgivable. I think that would be a better move. I simply forgot about the Tameo minus. Let's say the Tameo wasn't here, then I like my play a lot, because 2 attacks from Murktide will raise me. So now it looks like my opponent is forced to attack the Tameo, which is good for me. Brainstorm is scary. Fetch is not scary. Let's see what the opponent does here. I mean, they're kind of forced to attack the Tameo, otherwise I just plow the Murktide. So I have a 2-turn clock. My opponent has a 3-turn clock. And I get to hit first. So you can argue that now not cracking the Mesa is, you know, valuable, but I'm not sure. I don't think I can allow myself to get dazed in that spot. 2 days is gone, though. Maybe I thought about that. I can't remember, actually. So here's the worst draw on my deck. A land, get in for 12, and I'm kind of at the mercy of my opponent's draw. They obviously didn't have anything either with the way they fetched. Let's see. Now they need to put at least 5 toughness in front of the Dreadnought, or it's over. Pass the turn here. Very good for me, obviously. Then I know my opponent is going to chump block with Murktide. And then from that point on, my opponent needs to draw an answer for the Dreadnought, or it's over. I draw Wasteland. Not a great draw. Dreadnought gets in there. My opponent concedes here. Well, if they have 0 Brazen Borrowers and 0 Abrades in their deck, this is a reasonable concession. So I'm just going to assume that they had 0 answers here. Dreadnought gets the job done after a swath of interactive spells, and that's kind of how the games are supposed to go if we were winning. I don't think the matchup is super favorable or anything, but the 12-12 does put a lot of pressure on their exact removal suite to line up. So yeah, 3-1, going strong. All right, this is round 5. I'm playing against Reanimator. I've sideboarded out some Dazes, I've sideboarded out a Wasteland and a Dreadnought, and I've added some Graveyard Hate alongside some cheap interaction like Pyroblast and Misstep. This hand looks decent. I can Tameo early, Curie early, some potential with the Stifle. I go turn 1 Tameo. Yeah, I really like my spot here. Obviously, I'm weak to Entomb Reanimate, which happened game 1. Let's see what my opponent's up to here. Swamp Thoughtseize, take the eye. So this is not good for me, because I know what that means. That means my opponent can go for that card out of the graveyard. So now I basically have 2 options. I can hold up Stifle, which interacts against Animate Dead, or I can develop the Curie and basically not worry about reanimation. I think what I end up doing is playing a Surveil Land and holding up Stifle. Trying to play around 3 of their 7 reanimation cards. I think that's a reasonable play. Also, their second land might be, you know, a fetch. So, lots of good options here. I Surveil, and I keep the Dreadnought because right now I'm hoping to, you know, stifle something, untap, and then go Dreadnought plus Stifle. Here's Reanimate on the Oculus. Which is awesome for the opponent. The opponent plays Surveil, gets rid of an additional copy of Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize already did its job here. Oculus starts to do its work here. Here, I try and make a Dreadnought, but my opponent has a Force of Will. I mean, I have another Stifle here, so could be in good shape. My opponent has second Force of Will. Okay, yeah, that's brutal. I extend the hand here, GG's. I just, you know, got owned here. Thoughtseize, taking my creature, so I'm enabling my opponent's reanimation. That's brutal. Getting reanimated and then double force to solve the issue here. And my opponent sends me packing, I think. But when I have a look at the tiebreakers, it actually turns out that I do have a win in the last round. So I won some matches early, and my opponents did well. So yeah, winning in match coming up. All right, this is round 6 of the Legacy Challenge. This is a win-in match. If I win, I go to the top 8. If I lose, I'm off to bed. So I'm playing against Sneak and Show. This is game 3. And I really like how my sideboard lines up against this deck. I can cut my removal with no concerns at all. I can trim on my Dreadnoughts and go into control mode. I can trim on Wasteland because sometimes they can sit on basics. And then I can add a ton of cards like Pyroblast, Hydroblast, Force Negations. Even the Missteps are good. And yeah, I really like my chances against a deck like this. This opening hand is fine. I probably end up playing it very conservatively with Fetchline Pass here to make sure I have Force of Will with Pyroblast backup. Or whatever, Show and Tell Force, I guess. Oh, shoot. The opponent with a blazing start here. Pedal, Exile Spirit Guide, cast Sneak Attack, 2 cards in hand. So at this point, if my opponent's last 2 cards are Force Will blue card, at least they are a creature and a red source away from winning the game. But yeah, this is kind of a forced play. I draw a Wasteland, which is not good. I hold up Pyroblast. Opponent has the second land. It's not wastable. I draw Curie. So here, I could have played Curie, but I end up saying I want to delay that for 1 turn to not lose to, you know, land Show and Tell being in my opponent's last 2 cards plus the top of the deck. If the price is, let's say I did not have any lands, then I play the Curie, but now I'm actually, I know I can play next turn with Pyroblast up, so at that point, it's kind of an easy play to make. So here, I should talk a little bit about this actually. My opponent develops another fetch, so here I can either choose to develop the Wasteland to pay for the Curie, make it so that my opponent cannot go dual. Well, and if they do, then I can double Wasteland my opponent, or I can try and conceal the information that I have back-to-back Wasteland and do it like this. And I think it's quite close. I end up realizing that if I play this turn without playing out a Wasteland, my opponent will go for Surveil end of turn, and that's the first Wasteland, and then maybe I can get the second one to do something. But if I develop the Wasteland, I can get, my opponent will get off that plan, and then maybe my second Wasteland never gets to do anything. So turns out I was wrong here. My opponent just takes the turn. Cast a Brainstorm. That is a card I could have countered. I decide not to. It looks like I'm surviving with a Curie in play, but of course my opponent could have a Pyroblast or a Braid waiting for me to go kind of all in on a Dreadnought line. Here I draw the negation. I can't play out this Wasteland fast enough. At this point, Wasteland is a colorless mana source. This is very important when you're playing a Wasteland deck, realizing when is it a colorless mana source, when is it a Stone Rain. I think in this scenario, it's definitely a colorless mana source. However, drawing a blue card can change that. So I believe what I do is I pass the turn and I Wasteland my opponent on their draw step. The reason why I do it on draw step is I'm forcing my opponent to draw the card that they put there. But I don't let my opponent have that land in the main phase. Let's see if that is actually what's going to happen here. That would have been the good play. Yes, exactly. So the reason I do this is if I Wasteland on my turn, my opponent has that agency to go and Surveil, right? Then they know they're getting wasted. Not they don't know, they can have a suspicion, but they don't know, right? So I end up wasting on draw step. Very important point here. It's a very good to have up in your arsenal. When do you do it on your turn? When do you do it upkeep? When do you do it draw step? When do you keep it in play for mana source? But because I drew the blue card, I don't mind pitching here if I have to. So it looks like my opponent is main facing some stuff here. Maybe they thought that I did it on main face. Unsure. Maybe they play around Stifle. But at the very least, we get to get value out of our second Wasteland. I draw the Force, which basically locks up the game, right? I'm attacking with Psychic Frog's Little Brother. Yeah, now I have triple counter, and I Wasteland my opponent. There's the concession, and Slow and Steady wins the race here. My opponent asks the very tough question turn 1. They didn't have a choice, right? Then they play wisely with their fetches, and it ends up my slow-rolled Wastelands. Even though I trimmed a Wasteland in the matchup, the double Wasteland ends up being backbreaking. Of course, attacking with an Ophidian every turn is very, very strong against any combo deck. At no point was I super scared about losing here. I kind of felt like I had a lot of wiggle room. I just had good tools, right? Good land spell ratio, drew some disruption, some Wastelands, and and a card advantage engine. So that means I'm ready for the top 8. Let's see how it goes in the quarterfinals. All right, quarterfinals time. I love these top 8s. As I talked about a few times, I did some count some few months ago, and I think we are around the 500 top 8s lifetime, which I'm very, very proud about. But the fact that I'm most proud about is that I'm still as excited about number 500 as I was with number 1, 2, 3, 4. So that passion for the game is priceless, and I hope to keep it up. That being said, I'm paired against my old friend Oops All Spells here in the quarterfinals. We traded games. Basically, I got smoked game 1. My sideboard cards crushed my opponent game 2. Also, what I can say about this matchup is if you ever get the turn and you get to play, you know, Cage, Have Up Days, Cast Consign, Cast Stifle, whatever, these Stifle effects have so much utility in the matchup between countering Oracle Trigger, countering Spy activation, countering Informer activation rather, and Spy ETB. So it's a lot about you need the turn, right? But I don't think I'm allowed to keep a 0 laner no matter what, so I'm not gonna bother you too much with this specific hand. Then I find this one. Let's see what the opponent does. The opponent mulls to 6. I mull to 6. I believe my opponent keeps this hand. No, my opponent mulls to 5. Okay, so this is actually a cool discussion because is my opponent going to 5 an argument for keeping more hands, or is it an argument for mulliganing more hands? And I've been playing Magic for plus 20 years, and I couldn't tell you that answer. It's mainly to say that if people are telling you that, oh, if they mull to 5, then you can get away with this hand, or if they mull to 5, you can also go to 5. The truth is probably somewhere in between those, so yeah, that was mainly just to get that point across. I do end up mulliganing here, and then I have this 5. Can I keep this 5? So basically what would happen is my opponent will either have a like Thoughtseize setup situation or simply just go for it, glass cannon, right? We have no idea of knowing. But I don't think having 0 lands and risking my opponent just having land pass is viable, so I believe I go to 4 here. I don't go to 4. I keep this 5. That's also defensible. I lose hard to the line that I described. I believe my opponent has 2 Chancellors. Yeah, this is awesome. 2 of the green Chancellors, so that allows my opponent to play yeah, single land, and then play the Informer, Lotus Petal. So what I could have done here was forcing the Petal. So let's think about when that is good. If I force the Petal, can I draw anything that wins me the game? I don't think so. So at this point, I'm basically just saying, I hope my opponent is kind of sleeping at the wheel. But my opponent is not a spring chicken, and they easily therapy the negation out. So let's try and think. If I negate the Petal, draw a card, let's say it's a land, I then cast Ponder, then I can find something like Force of Will or Force Negation, then the same thing happens. I think I'm simply not getting anywhere by forcing it. Could be missing something here. So yeah, I concede here, and I wish my opponent luck in the semifinals. I don't know. This game, it's super close. Well, that's not the word I'm looking for. It's super short. It's condensed, right? So I'm just trying to pull the most learnings as possible here. So this negation will stop my opponent if they go land, Dark Ritual. I force that. Then it represents multiple time walks. Then I hope to draw the first land, get into the game, right? That's kind of why I'm keeping the hand, and I think that's a reasonable keep. Definitely let me know if you would have gone to 4. So if you're going to 4, you need a Force Will and a blue card, and a land and something for it to be better, right? You can even argue Force of Will, blue card, cantrip, like another 0 lander would be better, I guess. Very close. Nonetheless, this was our final stop in this tournament. I get eliminated in the quarterfinals. I had a lot of fun playing Jeskai Dreadnought. Had some grueling games against Delver, a lot of combo decks that can put pressure on you, but I actually feel like the sideboard is reasonably well set up to handle that pressure. I might have to account a little bit more for Oops All Spells. Getting crushed by it twice always makes me think. And yeah, I hope this video made you guys think about some cool things, maybe learned a thing or two. Maybe you can teach me a thing or two in the comments. I'm always happy to hear about some observations that I might have missed. I'm sure there are plenty. But yeah, we keep learning every day and growing stronger, and that's what this channel is all about. Guys, thanks so much for watching as always. I hope to see you back soon for more sweet, sweet old magic action.